I decided to try my hand at making video game reviews. Yeah, as if there aren't enough people doing that already. Anyways, consider this a pilot episode. Today, we are taking a look at CrossCode, a retro-inspired indie action RPG developed by a small studio Radical Fish Games, and released in 2018 for Windows, Linux and OS X, with console ports on their way. It's been in development since 2012, and in 2015 it was crowdfunded on Indiegogo. Unlike certain other crowdfunded games in recent memory, it actually turned out to be extremely worthwhile, so the backers didn't have to cry like an anime fan on prom night. If you grew up playing JRPGs on your SNES, then this game is pretty much made for you. You might as well stop the video, get the game and start playing. You're going to love it. But what about people like me, who never had a 16-bit console growing up, and thus don't have nostalgia altering their perception? Did I like the game? Take a wild guess. But is this game right for you? Let's take a look and find out. The game is set in the far future. As one could imagine, much progress has been made. Humans have finally reached into space, began colonizing star systems, hit a devastating civil war, recovered from it, and continued expanding across the galaxy. In fact, space colonization has become so mundane that a corporation can afford to terraform a moon and turn it into a playground for an augmented reality game. And this is exactly what happened. Instatainment Limited, a galaxy-spanning entertainment corporation, has developed an MMO called Crossworlds. Unlike any MMO you played, this one doesn't take place in a virtual world. All locations in Crossworlds are real. This is possible thanks to two technologies developed by Instatainment. The first one is called Instant Matter. It's a gaseous substance that can be electronically controlled and ordered to crystallize, making solid objects appear quite literally out of thin air, hence the name. It's never actually explained what exactly instant matter is, but I suspect it's
nanomachines, son!
Nanobots have become a staple of science fiction after all. The second invention that made Crossworlds possible is a neural link which provides a direct interface between a human brain and a computer. This allows players to remotely control avatars made of instant matter and receive sensory feedback. They can see, hear, smell and feel whatever their avatar comes in contact with. Crossworlds MMO is where our story takes place. We are playing a game within a game. Upon starting a new game, you are dropped into the prologue, which also serves as a basic tutorial. You play as Shizuka, who is trying to rescue her brother Satoshi. It is not yet revealed what he has gotten himself into, but it's hinted that he is held there against his will, and that he has to finish some project he's been working on for a long time. As if that wasn't enough, we learn that he is terminally ill, so he is quite literally working himself to death. It's easy to understand why Shizuka is so desperate to get him out. However, she is too late. Her brother dies in her arms after barely finishing his magnum opus. After that, the game starts for real. This time you are in control of Leah. The first thing you notice is that she has a striking resemblance to Shizuka. She even has the same scar. Right after her avatar is initialized, Leah gets a video call from Sergei, who immediately notices that not everything went smoothly. Leah's speech synchronization module doesn't work, meaning that her avatar can't speak. Although Sergei later manages to hardcode a few words into Leah's neural link software, allowing her to say things like hi, bye, Leah, and so on. As if her speech issue wasn't enough, it turns out that she suffers from amnesia and cannot remember anything about herself. This is actually the reason Leah is here. She has played Crossworlds in the past, so Sergei believes that by putting her back into the game, he can trigger her memories and help her recall her past. Since she doesn't remember how to play, Leah is put through a small obstacle course that serves as the continuation of the tutorial for the player. Upon finishing the course, she finds out that she isn't technically in the game yet. She is on board MS Solar, a cargo ship that belongs to the Instatainment maintenance crew. This was done because Sergei doesn't want Leah to attract any attention, as it turns out that he sneaked her into the game unofficially. Such secrecy makes Leah suspect that there is more going on than she is told. Her suspicion is confirmed when a mysterious avatar that looks like a Hindu deity trespasses into the ship and attempts to abduct her. With the help of Sergei and the ship's crew, she narrowly escapes into the game's official playground. This marks the beginning of Leah's quest to regain her memories and discover the truth about herself and her shadowy adversaries. The fact that the story of CrossCode unfolds in a game within a game allows for more creative freedom for the developers. There are two narratives that are separate but intertwined. One is a narrative of Crossworld's MMO, where seekers embark on an epic journey along the track of the ancients to uncover their secrets. It is full of clichés one would expect from an MMO. The tone can be silly at times, and it's clear that you are not supposed to take it too seriously. The other narrative is Leah's journey of self-discovery, where she must come to terms with whatever she learns about herself and her past. The tone is a lot more serious, and the scope is much smaller. We aren't saving the world from an ancient evil or anything like that. It's a lot more personal, and much more relatable. This duality actually helps with the immersion, even if it might sound counterintuitive. Think about it. Normally, a game tries to imitate real life, so every discrepancy, every example of video game logic, sticks out and chips away at the believability of the experience. CrossCode is a game that tries to imitate a game. Being too video gamey isn't breaking the immersion, it's helping it. Leah's party members would often comment about different aspects of Crossworlds that they find objectionable, from lazy and uninspired enemy designs to landscapes that couldn't have formed naturally. You could view this as just banter, or a meta-commentary on game design straight from the developers. But in any case, this doesn't feel out of place, and it helps to flesh out the characters by giving us a glimpse into their way of thinking. Let's talk about the characters. CrossCode might have the best written characters of all the games I've played. All of the important ones are well fleshed out and given unique personalities. Even the minor characters, whom we only meet a couple of times throughout the whole game, are treated well by the writer. It would be easy to make them bland and forgettable, and nobody would have complained. But even they show signs of care and effort put into them. Nobody feels like a cardboard cutout. Of course, the most important character is our heroine, Leah. The way the protagonist of a game is written can make or break the game for many players. Thankfully, the writers did a great job with her, especially given how limited they were by Leah's speech impediment. Nevertheless, she ended up very emotionally expressive, a testament to the power of non-verbal communication. The second most prominent character is Sergei. He's always watching over Leah, giving her advice or shedding light on the inner workings of Crossworlds. From the very beginning, it seems that he might know more about Leah and her circumstances than he's willing to tell her. But at the same time, he's extremely helpful and can get Leah out of difficult situations, which would otherwise end her journey. Emily is a Crossworlds player who bumps into Leah at Newcomer's Bridge. Being very competitive, Emily challenges Leah to a race through the tutorial dungeon. After winning the race, she befriends Leah and joins her party. This moment marks the beginning of their friendly rivalry, where they would race every dungeon together. Emily is very friendly, energetic and talkative, but not very observant, since she remains oblivious to Leah's speech module issue for a surprisingly long time. Apollo is also a Crossworlds player, one who probably takes role-playing way too seriously. Just like Leah, he's a proud spheromancer. When he sees Leah exiting the tutorial dungeon, he notices that she is level 4, whereas new players are only supposed to reach level 3 at this point. He immediately accuses Leah of cheating, but his friend Jorn convinces him to calm down and let the issue go. Later in the game, Apollo crosses paths with Leah and challenges her to a PvP duel. He would continue to do so throughout most of the game. You gotta admire how delightfully over-the-top Apollo is, how much he enjoys theatrics and making a spectacle out of his PvP battles with Leah. Another notable character is Citron. Just like Emily, he becomes Leah's party member. He's a biology nerd and often complains about enemies, level design and anything else in the game that he finds not to be realistic enough. Banter between Emily and Citron is always amusing. Even the main antagonist is really well written. It would have been easy to make him a mustache-twirling villain, and yet he was given proper depth and motivation, making him a complex and conflicted man. I'm afraid I cannot elaborate more without risking to spoil the ending. You'll have to play and see for yourself. CrossCode wears its inspirations on its sleeve. Just by looking at it, you can tell that the developers were influenced by JRPGs of the 16-bit era, and aren't ashamed to admit it. The game features carefully crafted pixel art sprites and textures that come together to form a beautiful, lush world filled with detail. Each area looks and feels distinct. Autumn's Rise and Autumn's Fall are modeled after Europe. Bergen has a strong Tibetan vibe. Baki Kum looks like a Middle Eastern bazaar. Gaia's Garden resembles Amazon jungles. Basin Keep is a Blade Runner-esque dystopian cyberpunk city. And Sapphire Ridge is based on Japan. Despite the relatively low resolution the game internally runs at, it doesn't lack in detail, proving that art direction is more important than graphical fidelity. Besides, there is something timeless about the pixel art style. If you strive for photorealism, then chances are the game isn't going to age well. It might look cutting edge today, but in 10 years it might look hilariously outdated. However, a stylized rendition isn't going to become obsolete in the future, since it was never meant to look just like real life. In case of CrossCode, the artists used the limitations imposed by the style to their benefit rather than detriment, proving that sometimes less is more. This doesn't mean that CrossCode has a subdued look. On the contrary, it often becomes extremely flashy, especially late in the game, when you unlock a lot of level 2 and 3 combat arts. Some battles made me feel like I was dropping acid at a rave. I can't praise the attention to detail in this game enough. Take player portraits as an example. There are 5 classes in CrossWorlds. Triblader, a melee class, focusing equally on offense and defense. Quarterguard, a tank class with high defense. Pentafist, a melee-focused quick and agile class with high critical hits. Hexacast, a mage class with significant range attacks and buffing ability. Spheromancer, Leah's class, an unspecialized class with superior customization option. Each of them has a shape associated with it: triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon and circle respectively. You can tell a player's class just by looking at them. It's also worth noting that the Triblader class is associated with the fire element, and the triangles present in the character designs resemble flames. Similarly, Spheromancer is the most well-rounded class, so it's only fitting that the symbol is a circle. Let's talk about the music. It's great. Take a listen. choosing the right music can help create atmosphere and enhance the emotional impact of a scene, and CrossCode is a great example of it. It even uses a lack of music to this effect. When Leah is at the lowest point of her journey, the music just stops, mirroring the emptiness she feels inside. It's a surprisingly effective way to convey her emotional state. As for sound effects, I've always found it difficult to talk about sound design in games. People usually don't pay much attention to the sound, unless there's something wrong with it. In case of CrossCode, nothing seems out of place. Everything sounds like you'd expect, which is a sign of sound design done right. One thing of note is that the sounds plants make when you hit them are especially satisfying, and they never get old. Which is a good thing, since you're going to hear these sounds a lot. All of this is good and all, but it's a game we're talking about. So, what is it like to play it? CrossCode is an action RPG with fast-paced real-time combat. You have two types of offensive moves. You can hit one or more enemies with a powerful melee attack, or throw projectiles from a distance. By holding the fire button before releasing it, you throw a charge projectile that can ricochet from objects and even stun the enemy if thrown at the right moment. Your defensive options consist of quickly dashing out of harm's way or raising your shield to block incoming attacks. However, the real stars of the show are unlockable combat arts. Each time you level up, you earn CP. No, not that kind of CP. Go away, Pedobear. CP stands for Crosspoint. You can spend your CP in the Circuits menu. Some circuits provide passive benefits such as increased attack, HP regeneration, etc., while others are active abilities called combat arts. Each combat art belongs to one of four categories: melee arts, throw arts, dash arts, or guard arts. To perform the respective combat art, you need to hold down the special key while performing a melee attack, range attack, dash or guard. However, since combat arts are very powerful, the game doesn't allow you to spam them. Performing combat arts costs you special points or SP, CrossCode equivalent to mana. You gain SP in combat by attacking enemies. Besides the neutral mode you have by default, you can unlock 4 element modes as you beat the respective dungeons. Enemies can have resistances and weaknesses to certain elements, so choosing the right elemental attack can make dealing with them a lot easier. Each element comes with its own circuit tree and unique set of combat arts. If you hit an enemy with elemental attacks enough times, you inflict the corresponding status effect. Heat causes burn, that deals damage over time. Cold causes chill, that slows down the target. Wave marks the target, increasing the damage inflicted to it by ranged attacks. Shock causes jolt, that deals damage over time and can interrupt certain actions. Be aware that the same status effects can be inflicted upon you by enemies. Speaking of enemies, they too have a few tricks up their sleeves. Each enemy type has its own arsenal of offensive and defensive moves. To effectively deal with them, you will need to pay attention to their behavior and come up with a strategy. For example, bulls have armored heads, so frontal attacks are ineffective. One way to deal with them is to use their behavior to your advantage. A bull will often charge at you, but since it cannot change direction once it has committed to it, you can dash away. If there's an obstacle behind you, the bull will hit it and get stunned for a moment. This creates a window of opportunity for you to hit it from the back. Another way is to take advantage of having party members. While the bull is trying to attack them, you can sneak behind it and kick its ass, literally. CrossCode combat begins to truly shine when it comes to boss battles. There are over 30 different boss encounters in the game, while several of them are basically tougher versions of regular enemies with additional attack moves. Most of the bosses are unique. The majority of bosses go through different stages as you chip away at their health, They will test your wit, reflexes and mastery of combat mechanics. Each boss encounter is like a puzzle to figure out the best strategy. Speaking of puzzles, they play a major role in the game. Each dungeon you have to clear out to progress through the story is a series of intricate puzzles with enemy encounters thrown in here and there. The puzzles start off easy, gradually introducing new mechanics and letting the player figure them out. That's right, the game trusts your intelligence and doesn't tutorialize everything. Then again, the puzzles are designed to ensure that players are able to understand how things work without being explicitly told. This doesn't mean that they aren't challenging. Quite the contrary. At times I was quite tempted to look up solutions to certain puzzles. Having said that, resisting the temptation and finally figuring them out on my own felt extremely satisfying. Besides solving puzzles and fighting enemies, there's also exploration. CrossCode is a game full of secrets to be discovered. It rewards you for paying attention and being curious. While the main story is linear, there are dozens of optional side quests to solve and locations to explore. Each area has chests with loot scattered around, some easy to spot, others well hidden. Getting to some chests can be a puzzle in its own right. As a general rule, harder to reach chests have better items inside, so going out of your way to get them is usually justified. Since we are talking about exploration, this is a good time to discuss level design. A lot has been said about CrossCode levels. GameSoup made an entire video about them. I won't go into too much detail, because this video is already getting pretty long. Levels in CrossCode are designed with exploration in mind. Even though graphically CrossCode is a 2D game, conceptually it's more like 2.5D. Most levels have multiple plateaus of different heights. If two of them are close enough to each other, Leah can jump across the gap. Jumping is done automatically when you run towards an edge. Similarly, to jump onto a ledge, you just run into it and Leah will jump up automatically. CrossCode levels consist of layers of different heights stacked on top of each other, and each layer can potentially have its own paths and locations that can be accessed by platforming. Moreover, quite often plateaus span across two adjacent levels. This way, to get to a hard-to-reach spot, the player might need to cross the boundary of the level. While at first this approach to level design can seem confusing, jumping from cliff to cliff quickly becomes second nature, and you'll be wondering why more games don't do it this way. I've heard some people call CrossCode grindy. On my first playthrough, I got a similar impression. However, when I played the game for the second time to record footage for this review, I realized that I was doing it wrong the first time, and that I can avoid the grind altogether. That's because the best way to level up is not by killing lots of enemies, but by completing side quests and doing it in the correct order. Let me elaborate. Unlike many other RPGs, in CrossCode you always need 1000 XP to get a new level. However, the amount of XP you will get for the same activity depends on your current level. Each quest has a level associated with it, and you get the full XP reward only if your character level is equal to the quest's level. The more overleveled you are, the less experience you'll gain. Same is true for killing enemies. If the enemy's level is lower than yours, you'll get less XP. There's even a joke in the game about grinding. In Basin's Keep, Leah can bump into another player who tells her that he reached level 99 by killing tens of thousands hedgehogs in Autumn's Rise. Besides, if you ignore side quests, you'll miss out on a lot of content. Sure, the first side quests you'll get in Rookie Harbor and Autumn's Rise seem boring and predictable. Kill a certain amount of enemies, find and retrieve a MacGuffin, and so on. Pretty much what you'd expect from an MMO. However, they become more varied and more inventive the further into the game you get. For example, in Bergen, you'll have to face off with an insane scientist who is breeding an army of genetically engineered cyber goats to take over the world. There's even a tower defense minigame. Besides, one of the early quests given by Henry the Researcher in Autumn's Rise starts one of the longest running quest lines, with twists and turns that will catch you by surprise. In any case, by solving as many optional quests as you can, you'll stay ahead of the curve without the need to grind. Despite the fact that I've been gushing over the game so far, I have a few minor complaints. None of these are very significant, but they still annoyed me enough to deserve a mention. Besides, if the whole review consisted of me praising the game, you'd think I was extremely biased, and therefore untrustworthy. The most obvious, but at the same time the most subjective thing to complain about, is the size of the dungeons. They can be a bit too long for their own good. It seems that even the developers realized it, since two of the dungeons have a distinct middle point with a landmark, so you can take a break from solving puzzles and then return later. My favorite dungeons are So Nice and Zervitar, probably because they are the shortest. However, they are situated right next to each other, so you can run them back to back if you like. In any case, this is a matter of preference, and some players might enjoy longer dungeons. One more aspect of CrossCode that irritated me when I first played it were the time-based puzzles, where you need to perform certain actions within a short time window. I felt that often the time limit was a bit too restrictive and too annoying to deal with. Thankfully, there's an option in the menu to slow down puzzles. However, for my second playthrough, I decided to leave this option on the default setting, and this time around, time-based puzzles didn't seem quite as vexing as I remembered. It's also a shame that you don't get to choose your class. Leah can only be a Spheromancer. I do understand why this is the case. A small studio working with a limited budget wouldn't be able to afford balancing the game for all 5 classes and making separate circuitries for each. Besides, Spheromancer is the most versatile class and allows for various playstyles. Plus, you get the opportunity to have members of all classes in your party at various points in the game, so this is not a huge deal. Here I'd like to discuss things that don't fit into any other category, but are still worth mentioning. CrossCode is full of little jokes and references. For example, the very first boss you fight is a
giant enemy crab,
and to defeat it, you have to
attack its weak point for massive damage.
Another boss is a blue hedgehog that drops chili dogs when defeated. There's also an enemy called Sendemoth, and its description says that, quote, "It is extremely fond of sand, preferring the coarse and rough feeling to textures that might be more soft and smooth," end quote. Plus, since it's a moth, it always has the high ground. If you get stuck on a particularly hard puzzle, or can't figure out how to get to a certain chest, you should check out Verwin's video walkthroughs. Even if you've beaten the game, you might want to check them out anyways. He and his wife, Puella Doctor, do a great job at voice acting the game dialogues.
I greet you, Seeker. The proud explorers of the arid breeze are honored by your visit. My name is Jonathan Lorenzo Mahir Valente El Nassar, the leader of our company of braves.
Leah?
Do not worry, to my friends I am just Joel Mahir, and everyone is a friend to me, especially a pretty seeker like yourself.
Hi.
Fun fact, they have in-game counterparts made in their likenesses, and their walkthrough is even acknowledged in the game. What if you've beaten the game and want to experience it again, but starting anew without all the fancy abilities you've grown accustomed to doesn't sound appealing? Or maybe you've become so good at the game that it's not challenging enough for you anymore. Starting with version 1.2, CrossCode has a customizable New Game Plus mode. You can spend points you've earned by unlocking achievements during your first playthrough on modifiers for the NG Plus mode. Make the game extremely tough, or turn Leah into an unstoppable angel of death. Making Leah extremely OP unlocks new hilarious dialogue lines. Remember how Apollo reacted when he saw that Leah was one level above what she was supposed to be? Now imagine how he would freak out, seeing Leah being at level 60 or higher. If that isn't enough to spice up your experience, you can try out various mods that exist for CrossCode. That's right, CrossCode has an active modding community. You can play as a different class, get new unique party members, hoard pets, or even have an army of Emilys at your disposal. The sky is the limit. Here are some tips that might help you if you decide to play CrossCode. First of all, CrossCode is a game that demands your undivided attention. On my first playthrough, I used to stay up late and play, and, as you might imagine, my performance wasn't exactly stellar. If you are tired, your reaction time is impacted, you don't do as well in combat, and solving puzzles becomes a lot harder. You'll also need to pay attention to get the good ending. And, if you are observant, you'll probably see a major plot twist coming, since it's properly foreshadowed. It's not a coincidence that the advisor NPC tells you to stay vigilant every time he speaks to you. Don't neglect consumables. Throughout the game, you end up collecting a variety of food items that provide temporary buffs. Remember to use them, especially if you have trouble with a boss fight. Well-chosen consumables can tip the balance in your favor and make the fight a lot easier. Keep in mind that you can only have effects from up to 3 food items at the same time, so choose wisely. Also, if you need healing during combat, you can either opt for a sandwich that restores a large amount of HP instantly, or a drink that gives you HP regeneration over time. The former is better when your health is dangerously low, while the latter can restore a lot more HP in total while the effect lasts. Keep in mind that when you switch to an element mode, you still get 50% of the buff effects from the neutral circuits, in addition to the buffs provided by the circuits of the selected element. Also, when you switch to an element mode, you become more vulnerable to the opposite element. For example, if you plan on using cold base attacks when dealing with a heat-based enemy, you might want to switch to the neutral mode while on the defensive to avoid taking unnecessary damage, and switch to the cold mode when you are ready to attack. Platforming on ice can be very frustrating, especially when icy platforms are mixed in with regular ones. This is why you should always carry a pair of footwear that has the Ice Skater modifier. If you see a lot of slippery surfaces ahead of you, equip these shoes, and you'll find out that platforming becomes a lot easier. I think by now you've noticed that I really like this game. The developers put a lot of love and effort into it, and it shows. They created a beautiful world and filled it with memorable characters, each brimming with personality. If you like playing RPGs or enjoy puzzles, grab a copy of CrossCode on Steam or GOG and embark on a journey along the track of the ancients.